In the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright. We will set it alight. In the heart of the night.
Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. I probably don't have to tell you what I'm talking about here because you clicked on the video. This is my review of Group of Outcasts versus Hate Clown, which is It Chapter 2. This is, like the first installment, a giant movie based on one of the most iconic horror stories of all time by Stephen King. I probably don't even have to say that. The last video I posted on this channel was my review of It Chapter 1 from 2017, so a lot of my thoughts from that carry over to this movie, but if you want to hear those thoughts, watch that. And once again, the reason I'm doing this is because way back in September, the horror miser Monty G wanted me to review this movie, so I decided to do reviews of part 1 and 2 now that I have DVDs to watch. So I'm gonna link his channel once again because he's the reason I decided to go for a bigger, more iconic thing rather than the low-budget movies I like to review most of the time. So without further ado, these are my thoughts on It Chapter 2. Story is, what do I have to tell you? It's the kids who fought the clown demon in the first movie coming back to the town 27 years later and fighting the clown demon again. That is basically the whole movie. Music in this is very much the same as it was in the first movie. It's very big and orchestral and cinematic, and it brings back the nursery rhyme Oranges and Lemons as this creepy little motif, and it's got its own themes in the movie, but those don't really stand out to me. But it's a very, very beautiful sounding score, and it adds to the emotional aspect of a lot of the scenes, and I enjoyed that. Not really as much, if any, 80s music in this one, because this one is not set in the 80s. Although it has flashbacks to that. I don't need a movie to tell me to listen to 80s music. I can do that on my own and will gladly do so, so that wasn't a problem for me. I can watch the first movie or I can put on a new wave album myself, thank you very much. Anyway, music was good. The story was good as well, but I had problems with it, and my problems with it are probably the same problems a lot of people have brought up. The opening scene, which is very much a notable death in the movie, although it's not our main characters. It's within the first few minutes of the movie, so it's not really a spoiler, so I'm going to talk about it here, and that is the very cute gay couple who get brutally beaten and then thrown into the lake and subsequently eaten by Pennywise. This scene is genuinely horrifying and brutal. What was good about it was it sets up Pennywise and sort of his essence throughout Derry as this embodiment of hatred and oppression, misogyny, brutality, etc. It's genuinely frightening and it works to that end. But the rest of the movie doesn't follow suit. I mean, it touches on those themes the way the whole It story does, but the rest of the movie feels less like this dark, oppressive horror story and more like this group of misfits who are dealing with oppression in the form of an evil clown. It kind of feels like Pennywise probably directed this movie because it just revels in these really cartoonish, dark moments. It's very silly and cartoonish. It doesn't feel horrific as much. There are horrific moments, but based on that first scene and based on how silly and admittedly fun the rest of the movie gets, it just doesn't quite work. I get what they're going for, but if you're gonna set up the movie to have that tone, it should have that tone, and it doesn't. It's just this god-awful scene that kind of sets something up but also doesn't. I've got some very mixed feelings about this movie, but that scene was well done, but does it work the way it's supposed to? I don't know. I don't know if it really does. The scares and the kills in this movie, there are a few genuinely creepy exceptions and some genuinely brutal stuff like at the beginning of the movie. But all in all, the scares just are hysterically funny, and they play that up. There's literally a scene where someone gets blood vomited all over their face, probably some other stuff, and they play like this cheesy pop music over it for like 2 seconds, and it feels like the movie like just turns into a goofy memed overdubbed version of a scene from this movie for a few seconds rather than just being very grotesque. It turns into a horror comedy. I enjoyed that, but it's I don't know. It works, but it doesn't. It's enjoyable, but should that be enjoyable? Or should that scene be genuinely horrifying? Because an evil clown's gonna be silly. There's some silliness to the scares in the first movie, but this movie just goes full throttle ridiculous with a lot of the moments. I enjoyed the comedy, but it should just take itself a little bit more seriously than I think it did. Going back to that opening scene, there is this queer aspect of the movie, and by queer I mean gay, because that's the only queer representation in the movie. I can tell that their intentions in putting it in there are good and almost work. The relationships and the characters that we see being pretty much the gay couple at the beginning of the movie and then Richie are very heartfelt, and I appreciated that, but it has issues, and other people have delved into this probably more insightfully than me. I recommend looking up other videos for that, but for a movie that is literally about people who have been outcast fighting against this giant being of oppression and hatred on literally a cosmic scale, these gay characters who have been marginalized and hated always really just get a bad deal in life, whereas other characters do undergo horrific stuff just like they do. They come out of it ultimately happy with this bitter element, and without spoiling anything, none of the queer characters in this get a break ever. Again, other people have probably delved into this more insightfully than me, but for a movie that is about overcoming oppression, they don't really get that in the end. And that said, I could tell that what they were trying to do was good, and I felt for the characters, and that was nice, but at the same time, all the gay characters get screwed over, and I don't appreciate that. So, yeah, I mentioned, cosmic scale. We delve more into the cosmic horror aspect of what Pennywise or it actually is. Not that much, because the movie's 3 hours long, and if we delved that much into the backstory of what Pennywise is, I honestly don't know that much about it, because, again, disclaimer, have not read the book yet, need to, but the cosmic horror in this comes off more sort of over-the-top, sci-fi-ish and campy than it does sort of this Cthulhu looming dread, which they'd kind of achieved in the first movie without telling you anything cosmic was happening, because there's that fear of the unknown, and they just kind of dump all the info on you in this, which makes it feel more like this dark, twisted, comedic sci-fi fantasy movie than it does genuine horror. I appreciate the storytelling, it just wasn't scary. Speaking of Stephen King, he has a cameo in this movie, and it is comedy gold. I'm not going to tell you what happens because you just kind of need to see it. It's him being snarky and wonderful, and yeah, comedy gold. Then there's the other sort of relationship aspect, which is that we've got this romance going on between Bev and Ben that is carried over from the first movie, and it's very cute, and the poem and all that is very cute and heartwarming, but then there's also this aspect where there's a thing going on between her and, God, I can't remember its name, I'll put it below, and is it Bill? I think it's Bill. God, why do I do this? There's so many kids. Anyway, that just falls by the wayside and doesn't really get talked about again. It's just kind of briefly there in both movies, and it's just like, we're not gonna address that anymore. And yeah, the relationship is cute. I'm not sure what it does for the story in any way, but it's there. I don't know. It's cute, but it's kind of convoluted and doesn't serve the story, so I don't know. Again, very mixed feelings on this whole movie. So I've kind of talked about them already, but all of the adult members of the Losers Club are very well acted, and I enjoyed them. And Bill Hader as Richie is hysterical, and the guy who plays Eddie in this movie is also really funny, because he's, his character is just kind of terrified of everything all the time, and it just makes for some moments that are just really, really funny. Great moments of comedy throughout the movie, as I've already said. All of the members of the Losers Club are just exactly like with the kids in the first movie. You feel the chemistry between them, and it's very sweet and heartwarming, and you can connect with them, and it's great. Then we've got Pennywise again, and he is exactly more or less like he is in the first movie, but he just gets to hog the screen so much more and show himself off so much more that he becomes funnier than he is scary. Again, there's that fear of the unknown in the first movie that makes him much creepier, and this one takes away that unknown element and just goes with the spectacle. So Pennywise isn't as scary, but he is enjoyable and he's fun. Just like with the first movie, cinematography, costumes, and sets are all beautiful. They just capture exactly what the town of Derry and the characters in it need to be. Then we've also got the carnival element, which was kind of this interesting little subplot that I don't know if it needed to be there, but whatever. I like creepy fun houses, and the fun house with all of the clowns and stuff, and the Hall of Mirrors. I always just like eerie fun houses. I just love the look of them and sort of the disorienting, chaotic nature of them, so I liked the fun house. And speaking of that, the haunted house, as in the house that they went through at the end of the first movie and at the end of this movie, they bring it back and it feels like a Halloween haunt. It is jump scare ridden and very goofy and has this very campy sense of humor. It literally homages movies like The Thing and The Shining at points, and it was very fun. I had a great time with it. It goes a little overboard at the end, I think, but all in all, it was just a really fun spectacle. It does kind of go overboard with the effects at the end, but a lot of people said that the CGI in this movie looks bad. I don't think so. I think that all the effects in this, while they do go further than they needed to, they still work. This movie isn't subtle or creepy the way the first movie is, even though that one is only relatively subtle, but it's still good. Again, lots of mixed feelings. It doesn't work as horror, but it works as a story. It's kind of silly. It goes into horror comedy where I'm not sure it should, and it has some sort of problems with story that get convoluted and make some choices I don't think it should have, but all in all, this movie is still really good storytelling, and it captures what it needs to be, which is the story of these outcasts and their bond of friendship versus this giant evil hate clown demon thing. That's what we wanted, and that's what we got. It may not have been perfect, but I think it's still a good movie. I definitely still recommend this if you haven't seen it yet. That is the non-spoiler part of my review of It Chapter 2. Here are the spoilers. If you didn't know, why am I forgetting his name now? Stanley. Stanley commits suicide earlier on in the movie, and honestly, this was more shocking and horrifying to me when it happened in the Tim Curry miniseries than in this, because you aren't expecting it in the miniseries, and they played up more as a horror thing. In this, it still kind of hits you emotionally, but more in sort of this sad way than in a horrifying way, which I think it should have been played up more horrifically than just tragically, although it is tragic. So it doesn't really capture the horrific aspect as much as it should have, but it was dark. Then, much like in the first movie with Bev and her dad, we have Bev having this brutal confrontation with her current boyfriend slash, I couldn't tell if they were married yet or not, fiance, husband, what have you, and he's just as kind of untrusting and overprotective and stifling and creepy as hell as Bev's dad was, and we get another horrifying, abusive confrontation, and she just brutalizes him, and it was very dark and intense, and ultimately kind of satisfying to see him get messed up. So that scene was another genuinely dark scene that I thought worked in the movie's favor. Another one of those was the scene at the ball game where the little girl gets lured behind the stands to where Pennywise is, and he plays the sympathetic poor little clown who everyone's afraid of and nobody wants to play with. She's got sort of this rash or scar of some kind on her face, and he's like, oh, I can blow that away with my magical clown powers. And he just counts 3, 2, and just stops and starts drooling, and she's like, you're supposed to say 1, and then he just eats her, and you genuinely feel horrible for her, and that scene was genuinely horrifying. Also, why does Pennywise sound like Winnie the Pooh in that scene? Think about it for a moment. He kind of does. After that, we've got a few other, like, really silly kills. Not kills, scares. That was a kill. This is a scare. Figure it out. Anyway, there's the scene with Bev in the old lady who is actually Pennywise's apartment, and then she just kind of, for whatever reason, suddenly doesn't have any clothes on and is flying around the apartment like a lunatic, and it starts out kind of unsettling, and it just becomes, like, ridiculously hysterical by the end, and I can't take it seriously. And then also there's some backstory to, like, Pennywise the clown being an actual clown at some point, and, like, where it got its Pennywise form from, so, there's probably more of that in the book. They just kind of throw it in there, and I don't know what it means, so mixed feelings again. And then the other really ridiculous scare that I absolutely could not take seriously was when, in the flashback, when Ben is talking to Bev, and Bev is actually Pennywise, and just completely lights on fire and starts reciting the little poem that Ben wrote to him, and then pops out of his locker and says the little "kiss me fat boy" line. That was utterly ridiculous. Kind of enjoyable, but also why? Yeah, I don't know how to feel about this movie. It's good, but I don't know. Then after all of that, we've got the finale in the deep dark recesses underneath the house. You're gonna take the clown that is the literal embodiment of hatred and then decide that the way to get rid of it is to hate it to death, because that makes sense. It just, the way they kill Pennywise in this feels really cheesy and doesn't work for me at all, honestly. But, you know, if they had done it through, like, the power of the magic of friendship, that would have kind of been weird as well, but that was honestly kind of what they were doing, and then that didn't work. I don't understand how the mythos in this movie works. It just doesn't, what? I don't understand. And then Eddie dies, and we find out that, you know, Richie was in love with him, and that is very cute and sad, but also he did not need to die. I don't remember if he dies in the miniseries. I don't know if he dies in the book, but he didn't need to die, and again, we have the queer character not coming out on top the way his friends kind of do in the end, so it's kind of very, very sad. But the way that his friends support him at the very end of the movie is really cute, and I liked that. This movie has flaws, but it's still really good storytelling, and The Losers Club is still really, really well done, and I really liked them. So It Chapter 2 is ultimately not a perfect movie, but a good movie, and I highly recommend watching it. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!